Present to you so that we can get started. Virginia Law, who is the NAACP taxpayer person, along with Pamela Harden, who's right there in the back. Virginia's going to be your moderator for the Virginia.
Everybody gets 2 minutes for their opening statement.
Sure. My name is Brooke Jacobs. I'm the Division One. I'm the Division One Circuit Court Judge here in the 13th Circuit, which is made up of Boone County and Callaway County. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight to speak with you all, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on things that are going on too. I've been your circuit judge now for the past year, and I've got a track record. I've been on the bench. I've handled criminal cases, civil cases. I would say I've had thousands of hearings. I've had 7 jury trials, and prior to taking the bench, I served as an attorney, prosecuting attorney here in St. Louis County and in Orlando, Florida. So I've had the benefit of seeing how things are done in other jurisdictions. I've tried over 50 jury trials, and that's valuable experience that I take with me on the bench. One of the things that makes our system of government special is that we have the separation of powers. And our founders decided that no one person or no department of government ought to have too much power. And with that, we have to have an independent, strong judiciary. If you look back at the old Soviet Union Constitution, you might be surprised to know that they had much more robust protections for their people as far as search and seizure and police tactics. But, of course, that's a joke because everybody knows they had the KGB and there was no independent judiciary that would back that up in their Constitution. And it's humbling to me to be a judge, and I know that I have to be an independent jurist and enforce our law, apply our laws to people's disputes, and that's what I've been doing for the past year, and with your support, I'll do that for a full 6 years. Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Morrill. I am a candidate for Associate Judge Division 11 here in Boone County. I'm currently an Assistant Boone County Prosecutor where I've been for the last 7.5 years. Prior to that, I was with the Missouri Attorney General's Office. I've worked for Kansas Legal Services, also known as Legal Aid, and the Public Defender System. I have over 18.5 years of courtroom experience. I've conducted over 120 trials. I have handled over 300 appeals, including 12 in the Missouri Supreme Court. Most attorneys go their entire career without making it there. I also have practiced in 20 different counties throughout the state of Missouri, both civil cases and criminal cases. I'm also a single mom raising my 2 boys, and I work 3 jobs to make sure they have every opportunity that others have. So along with being Boone County Prosecutor, I'm also the Sturgeon City Prosecutor, and I teach night classes at Columbia College. My legal and life experience, because of my legal and my life experience, I know that the impact on real people judges' decisions have. I know that I will continue to strive as the next judge to make sure that people are treated fair, they are treated equitably, and they are treated right. One of my proudest moments as Boone County Prosecutor, actually several moments, for 7 years I was active in our treatment courts, our drug court, our veterans court, our DWI court. During that time, I watched hundreds of individuals get treatment, job training, counseling, and graduate. And at every graduation, I had the pleasure to say, I hope I never see you again in the criminal justice system. And for 12 years that I've been with the Boone County Prosecutor's Office, I am happy to say that most of those people we have never seen again, and we have accomplished something in our criminal justice system in Boone County. That is why I hope that you vote for me for Associate Judge Division 11. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Josh Devine. I currently serve as your Associate Circuit Judge in Division 11 here in Boone County. In that role, I've handled hundreds of criminal cases, hundreds of civil cases, many hearings. Prior to becoming your judge, I worked as a civil litigator. Before that, I grew up in Columbia. Was born and raised here, went to Hickman High School. My wife graduated from Rockbridge High School. She's the pretty face sitting in the back that my campaign so desperately needs. We don't talk too much about where we went to high school. She typically wins that argument here in Columbia. But I love this town, love this community. It's been an honor to serve the folks here in a community where I grew up. went to law school here as well. My dad was a professor at the law school for 30 years. I'm humbled to say that I've been able to carry on the tradition he started in my family, being born and raised in a household where we talk about things like the rule of law, equality under our Constitution, these very strong concepts that we have in our criminal justice system and in our legal system. Very humbling to serve in my position. So, talking a little bit about my background, worked as a civil litigator, handled civil cases. Those are cases where one person sues another. Worked in that realm for many years. Was very successful in that realm. I was honored to say, and I know this is, you boasted these types of things, and I hate doing it, but was named to Missouri and Kansas Rising Stars list 4 years in a row by Super Lawyers Magazine. When I was in law school, I graduated at the top of my class. Received numerous distinctions and honors while I was in law school. I received the Judge L.F. Gotti Award for Excellence in Written and Oral Advocacy. The thing that I pride myself on the most is working incredibly hard. And, you know, my dad told me when I was in law school that I wasn't the brightest person he'd ever seen. I wasn't, the most talented law student he'd ever seen, but I worked as hard as anybody he'd ever seen. And I plan to do that every day for you all as your judge in Division 11, and plan to continue to do that for many years to come. So I appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
I'm Finley Gibbs. I'm also running for Division 1 Circuit Court. It's a pleasure to be here, and I see some faces I recognize, which is always nice. And thank you for coming in and testing us and asking us questions. So a little bit about me. I'm 54 years old. I've been practicing law for 21 years here in Columbia and throughout the center of Missouri and even outside the state. It's been private practice the whole time. One of the things that I've noticed is I've walked around and talked to people, and over the last several years I've talked to around 2,000 people, knocking on doors and learning. There are three things that people seem to care about: legal experience, life experience, and experience with our community. I don't know if there's really any weight that goes, one of those 3 points is more important than the other two, but they all seem important to me. And let me tell you a little bit about how I fit those categories. First, legal experience. As I said before, 21 years in private practice. I've handled a lot. I've never counted, so I don't know how many cases I've handled, but it's been a lot. Hundreds and hundreds of civil, hundreds and hundreds of criminal cases. And often I've had to work on both sides of the aisle in civil cases. I've done cases for small businesses. I've represented people from our community. Briefly, my partner and I were able to litigate Turner versus Dillers, and for a little bit we changed civil rights law, but then we lost it. No. At any rate, additionally, bond with the community. I've been here 30 years. I'm a QB. I'm a tiger.
All right. All right.
Life experience-wise, in addition to whatever seasoning you get of 54 years of life. Additionally, I've been married to my wife for 30 years, and she has provided me with great training. Thank you.
Ms. Mary has noted that we are going to be asking questions from the audience, but the way the NAACP does it is that we would like you to write your questions on an index card and pass them to one of our members, and they will pick them up and give them to me. And this is to all of you. African Americans historically have received harsher sentences than their white counterparts for the same crimes. As a judge, how are you going to deal with this issue? And I'll give you the pleasure of starting first.
Sure. The question is about disproportionate sentencing with African Americans. And I don't doubt that that's true, especially in years past. I know it's true. What I can speak to is how I work in my courtroom. And in my courtroom, it's equal justice under the law. And one of the things that's important for you to know is that when I'm making a sentencing decision, the primary things that I consider are what are the facts of the case and what are the prior convictions. And those are relatively objective criteria that I take into account. I also look at any mitigating factors that the defense wants to know, things that are good about the defendant that might merit a lighter sentence. And I take that into account. What I don't do is take into account demographics or anything that's subjective that could result in implicit bias or disproportionate sentences. I would invite anyone here to come to my courtroom and watch how I conduct business. And that's one of the nice things about our country that makes our country special is that everything that happens in court is public. And you don't go off into closed session and then somebody goes off to prison for 30 years and nobody gets to find out why. In my courtroom, if I'm giving somebody probation, I tell them why I'm doing that, and I let them know what my expectations are. If I'm putting somebody in prison, I tell them why I'm doing that. I'll look out at the crowd and I see that that person's mother or family member or friends are there in court. And I owe it to them to explain to them why I'm doing what I'm doing. And the interesting thing is, as a judge, that's my only opportunity to explain myself. If somebody here wanted to ask me about a particular case, I can't tell you anything about it outside of court. But in the courtroom, in open court, where the lawyers on both sides are there to question me about what I'm doing, they have that right. I can say why I'm doing.
So the one thing about a judge is each individual, each case that comes before you, that is the most important case to that individual, and you have to consider not only the facts of the case, the law of the case, but what about each of those individuals that is unique. And when I say unique, individuals have different opportunities in life. Whether it's because of race, because of sex, because of gender, people have different opportunities. What I love about Boone County court system is that we have worked very hard over the last several years, several decades, to look at different opportunities for individuals. For example, our treatment courts, when we are looking at bail situations, I never want someone sitting in jail just because they're poor or just because they are a certain race. We need to look at what those options are. What opportunities has this person had in the past? When we look at treatment courts, with job, counseling, help, job opportunities, drug treatment, mental health treatment. It's not simply about putting an individual in jail. You have to look at their past. You have to look at what opportunities they have. And I think Boone County has always done a good job. We always can do better. And you always look at that individual case. And I promise that I will continue to strive to ensure that each person is treated fairly, is treated equitably, and we do what's right for that case. Thank you.
So disparate impacts is something that I'm particularly passionate about, and I'll tell you why. So over the summer, I spent some time with Reverend Dawson at my church and talking about some of these issues that impact the African American community. He asked a question. He asked, raise your hand if you've been in a group of people that are predominantly a different color than you. And I raised my hand, and I was really disappointed with the reason why I was raising my hand. And I went up and I talked to him about it, and that started a good conversation that we've continued to have. And that conversation started with the idea that my first day on the bench in criminal court, on my Tuesday docket, my public defender docket, I go from having a predominantly white courtroom until folks come in from the jail. And all of a sudden things change in terms of demographic makeup. I see far more African Americans, and that's something that impacted me in a very substantial way. And we talked about, your question was about sentencing, but I want to talk to you all a little bit more about what happens on the front end of a case. So if I have a case on my arraignment docket, I might be looking at somebody who's in custody on a $500 bond or a $250 bond. There is literally nobody in my world that I know that can't come up with $25, that can't come up with $50 to get themselves out of custody. Yet, I see these people every Monday when I do my arraignment docket. And my job is very simple in that regard. It's to be bold. If I see somebody that is sitting in jail on a non-violent property crime, and I don't know anybody else that wouldn't be in custody on that charge, my job is to be the person that grants them a release on their own recognizance bond. And I will do that, and I have done that, And in that regard, I try to deal with this disparate impact. That situation where there's a person who shouldn't be in custody because nobody else in that situation is in custody, I make sure that they get out of custody and they're afforded the same opportunity as everybody else that would have that money to be able to post that bond. Thank you.
Judges make decisions. They make decisions all day long, and those decisions are based on knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the better your decisions will be. So when a judge is trying to decide what somebody's sentence should be, they have to draw on the knowledge of the community. They have to draw on their knowledge of humankind. And they have to remember that this nation was designed to be a nation of fairness and a nation of justice. So whenever a judge is sitting there trying to decide whether somebody should be given a second chance, or whether somebody needs to be in one of the alternative sentencing courts or treatment courts, that's a decision that is helped by the amount of information a judge has. You know, you don't go out and buy a car just by the first one you bump into in a parking lot at a dealership. You research it. And an excellent judge goes through and researches the case file, they research the person, they research the circumstances, and they put it all together to come up with an understanding of the person that's in front of them. And when a judge is doing that, a judge does a much better job of avoiding disparate treatment, of avoiding sentences that are based on somebody's appearance, whether it's a racial issue or whether it's an issue of whether somebody's standing there in their construction clothes because they're too poor to go out and buy nicer clothes to stand up in front of the court. You cannot in any way make decisions that are based on anything except the people in front of you, the facts, and the law.
A young man received 20 years for a first-time nonviolent drug offense. He suffered from mental illness. What could have been the ultimate resolution? A resolution?
You want to start down here with Mr. Gibbs?
Sure. Mr. Gibbs.
That is a very difficult question, and so I'll leave out first. Judges have a very difficult time, and judicial candidates have to follow the same rules that judges do with talking about specific fact circumstances. And what I hear when you describe the situation, first-time offense, 20 years in prison, somebody with mental health difficulties, that sounds inappropriate. However, you know, we still have to know more. And that's what I was talking about before when I was talking about what a judge needs to do to make a proper decision. You know, I don't think that any of us are going to be able to directly answer that question without knowing what led up to that circumstance and what was the person's mental difficulties. You know, what was the nature of the crime? Were they driving a tractor trailer across the country with, you know, hundreds of pounds of marijuana? You know, I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but that does matter. Or was it somebody who was carrying around a pill that wasn't their prescription pill, which is a felony? So, knowing the facts of the case helps you make a decision about what is fair and right and what is not fair and right. But I think that most of us would have a difficult time giving you the, you know, the quick answer that most of us want.
Let me ask this then.
Sure.
In Boone County, are there specialized courts or, I know there's a veterans court.
There is a mental health court and there is a drug court.
Tell me about the mental health and drug court.
Okay. So let's start with mental health court. There are a lot of people, especially homeless folks, who are dealing with these relatively minor crimes, but they keep coming back into the system. And there are people who need treatment, not people who need jail time. You know, it's hard to imagine, and I'm sure nobody here is in serious mental difficulties right now, but it's hard to imagine that somebody who thinks so differently find them trespassing all the time, or sleeping outside where they're not supposed to be sleeping, and they end up catching more and more cases because of that, and it starts to build. So mental health court is designed to pull that person out of that treadmill and get them into counseling and get them toward a path where maybe, you know, they're getting them treatment so that they can abide by whatever rules they've been breaking. Drug court is very similar. Drug court recognizes that people that have problems, the idea is to get them into drug court and treated instead of simply pitched into the jail or the penitentiary, where, although there's treatment, they're getting very negative results from being in prison also. And if people graduate from these programs, often they can graduate without having a conviction, which is extremely important, especially if it's a felony case.
Really timely that you brought this up. So today on my Tuesday docket in the public that I work with the public defender's office, I had an issue come up. An individual, and actually one of our great public defenders, Ms. Jackson Williams. I'm sorry, I'm throwing you under the bus, Ms. Jackson Williams. She's here today. She made the argument. She was asking for her client to be released on his own recognizance, and it was a nonviolent first offense drug charge. Okay, I was getting some resistance, but the reason why I did it was several reasons. We started talking about mental health was a concern, and this person wanted to get proper treatment. He wasn't getting that in the custody of Boone County Jail. And so that's something I look at when an argument is presented to me. You know, is this person going to receive better treatment outside of custody than they're receiving in custody? And if they get that treatment, are we likely to have a better result? So Mr. Gibbs was talking about our treatment courts. We do have an incredible treatment court system. We actually have 4 of them. We have a veterans court, we have a drug court, we have a DWI court, we have a mental health court. So we can, if you have a particularized situation, we can fashion some relief in the right situation that would surface, I guess, address that particular need that you have in the right case. And if we address that, we've resolved the problem. There would be no longer be offender. So, for example, if you have somebody that's abusing drugs, and as a result of that, they're going out and they're committing property crimes. They're stealing so that they can take care of that drug addiction. I could punish them all day for stealing. But what have I accomplished? Exactly right. I've accomplished absolutely nothing. What I need to do is I need to try to address the underlying drug addiction, which if I address it by treatment, may resolve the offender problem. The person might relapse, there might be issues, but I don't look at it that way. I look at each individual case individually, this particular person's problems, and say, what can we do to help you? What's best suited to help you in this situation? Thank you.
So I mentioned in my introduction that I actually was part of the drug court team for about 7 years. I was the prosecutor assigned. We were able to transfer what we call divert cases into that program, and individuals that were successful, their cases were dismissed. So they received treatment, job counseling. Most times these were first-time felony drug offenses. And because of grants and rules that are in place, felony drug cases are the only cases that qualify. A first-time drug offender, felony drug offender in the state of Missouri, the range of punishment is from 1 day to 7 years. So the 20 years, even in the worst case on a felony offense, 20 years would not happen in the state of Missouri for a first-time felony offense. In regards to mental health court, we are able to divert those cases as well into our mental health court program. They also can qualify for diversion. During my time, the Boone County Court was nationally recognized as a mentor court, and courts around the nation came to our court to learn how to run these programs successfully, to divert individuals that found themselves in the criminal justice system. We also have a veterans court. During my time, we actually started one of the first veterans courts here in the state of Missouri, and we were able to work through that, and we started our DWI court. So we have programs set up, whether it's a diversion or it's part of probation, to put individuals in these programs, hopefully, like I mentioned in the introduction, to give them the assistance that they need to deal with whatever issue it is, whether it's a mental health issue, PTSD if we're talking about veterans, or a drug issue, so that we do not see them in the criminal justice system again. And for many times, individuals end up with not having criminal convictions, which is always a good result. Thank you.
As a circuit judge for the past year, I know how heavy the burden is to make decisions that affect our fellow citizens' liberty. Just about every Monday afternoon, I have what's called a law day docket, and that's where the bulk of sentencing occurs. And I'd say just about every Monday, I'm putting somebody, oftentimes multiple people, in our treatment court programs. And I always tell people when I've been out knocking on doors, I use this as an example, I say, the only thing happy that happens in court are adoption cases. If you're there for something else, it's probably not happy. Well, that's actually not true. On one of the happy things that happens on my law day docket is I'll bring in people when they've successfully completed treatment. And typically I will discharge them from probation early as a reward for having gone through that program. One of the things that is kind of special about Missouri is we have the option of, the judge has the option of suspending the imposition of a sentence on somebody. And that means that if they can successfully complete probation, then they are not a convicted felon at that point. And it becomes a closed record. And I know very well that it is a watershed moment if I'm making somebody a convicted felon, if I'm not doing an SIS on somebody. That's going to affect their employment. It's going to affect them for the rest of their life. And I know that. And that's something I take into account. It's also a major life change, obviously, if I sentence someone to imprisonment. And I know that it's very hard to recover from them. So I try to reserve that for people who I believe are a danger to the community. Not just people that I'm frustrated with, but this is their third time in front of me for simple possession of a felony drug. I absolutely try to distinguish between those who are dangerous and those who are just frustrated. So, thank you. My pleasure to serve you for the past year. I'd like to invite everyone in this room to come to the court sometime. You're here, so I know you're active. Be active by seeing what happens in court. If you think there are problems, speak up about it. But I do cordially invite you to my courtroom. Like I said, I've served for the past year. I feel as though I've done a good job. If you're curious about who to vote for in a judicial race, ask a lawyer or ask somebody before you enter. In my case, I think they'll tell you I'm doing a good job. I'd be honored to have your vote November 6th.
Hello again, and thank you again. I'm Finley Gibbs. I'm running for Division 1. I want to circle back just a little bit. If you remember before, I said there are three things that the public seem to want from a judge: legal experience, life experience, and experience with the community. And in those three categories, I believe I'm the most qualified. And again, I throw numbers out there all the time, but living in the community for 30 years matters. In between the time that I started college and the time I went to law school, I spent 7 years working in blue-collar and white-collar jobs alongside Mid-Missourians and learning and understanding and representing probably close to 1,000 Mid-Missourians on all kinds of cases, all kinds of clients. I've been learning and understanding. And all of that rolls up together to provide an understanding of the people who would be in front of me and a knowledge of how to take care of them. And I will be honored by your vote November 6th. Thank you very much.
My name is Stephanie Morrill. I'm a candidate for Associate Judge Division 11 here in Boone County. It matters who our judges are. I have had over 18 years of experience, courtroom experience, over 120 trials, 300 appeals in front of the Missouri Supreme Court. I've been an active member of our treatment court. I've handled civil cases. I've handled criminal cases. I spend an average of 3 days a week in the courtroom. I also work 3 jobs to support my 2 children. I understand that individuals have different opportunities, and it is important to know that the judge you're appearing in front of has the right legal and life experience to do what's right, what's equitable, and what's fair. And I believe I am the person that can do that. So I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
I'm Josh Devine. I'm your judge in Division 11. I'm asking for your vote on November 6th so I can continue my mission of making sure that everybody that appears in Division 11 is treated equally, in the exact same way, under our laws. So one of the things I pride myself on is being impartial. We've talked a lot about criminal justice in this room tonight, and I'm very proud of the fact that my background coming to the bench was as a civil litigator. I wasn't involved in the criminal justice system. Why is that important? Because I can be completely impartial when I deal with these issues, the very important issues that you all are very concerned about, and rightfully so. I don't have any bias in terms of whether I have a prosecutor background or a criminal defense lawyer background. I'm completely independent. I think that's the most important thing that you look at when you want to judge. I also want to talk briefly about the fact that Division 11 is very unique in the sense that it handles a vast majority of the civil litigation that's filed in Boone County. I'm particularly qualified to do that. That's my entire background coming to the bench, is as a civil litigator. So for that reason, I would ask for your vote, and I do appreciate your time tonight. It was a great conversation.
In fact, thank you all for everyone.
So thank you all so much.